What's up, freaks and geeks? We're going to go through some of my picks for essential viewing this October. First up on our list, we've got The Changeling, 1980. If haunted houses are about unfinished business, The Changeling is about how grief makes you fluent in the unfinished. This is some of the most atmospheric horror of the 1980s. That's wrapped around incredible acting with George C. Scott playing this tortured soul that brings depth to an already heartfelt story. This is a movie that forces you to pay attention. This is a movie that transports you to the time and place that it sits in. And it brings a level of atmosphere that is really hard to top even today. There's a reason why this movie is considered a classic. There are definitely more intense movies on this list, but this movie sets the tone. It sets the pace for exactly what October viewing is all about. It isn't just scary, it's persuasive. It convinces you that the past is polite enough to knock, but only once. Next up, we've got a classic, Scream 1996. Before Scream, slashers were a ritual. After Scream, they were a conversation. Wes Craven, Kevin Williamson handed the knife to the audience and asked, "You know the rules. What are you going to do about it?" Wes Craven's one of those guys that reinvented the genre multiple times. The opening with Drew Barrymore is a thesis statement. Cinema as call and response, terror as trivia night. It's funny, but the laughs only sharpen the blade, they don't dull it. And what keeps Scream an annual rotation isn't just meta cleverness, it's the heart behind it. Sidney Prescott is arguably the greatest final girl that horror has ever seen. And her grief is the center of the story. It is the center of gravity for this entire universe. The whodunit is genuinely tricky. The kills are brutally intimate. The acting is really strong. And that small town gossip feels all too real. It feels like hush whispers around secrets that everybody knows, but nobody wants to say out loud. And it curdles into something mythic. We talk about Scream as a turning point, but it also plays like a great campfire story. One told by a friend who knows that you love horror because it makes you feel seen, not because it makes you feel superior. Scream is essential viewing during the month of October because it is a checkpoint and a redefinition for an era of horror while being timelessly classic. Next up, we have another movie that reinvented a subgenre of horror with 2007's Paranormal Activity. Y'all know I love found footage, and it's usually all about chaos. Paranormal Activity wins, though, by refusing to move. One bedroom, one camera, one couple trying to sleep, while something decides that they're not going to be so lucky. The film's boldest choice is that static frame. No shaky sprinting, just a wide angle that posts you almost like a security guard. That timestamp ticks forward. The house seems to sigh at night, and suddenly you are scanning that doorway with pinpoint accuracy. Underneath the creep is this relationship portrait that's sharp. Micah treats this thing like a project. He doesn't really believe it, but it's caught his interest, and he's got money to burn on toys, gear. He's chasing evidence. He's poking the bear. While Katie just wants this thing to go away. She wants to forget that this thing exists, and she wants this thing to forget that she exists. Control versus consent is the heartbeat of this story. The entity only needs a crack, and that crack is pride. The title cards become progress reports on the fight that they never stood a chance of winning. And by that middle stretch, you can feel the exhaustion start to set in on them and on you as you're following their story. The sound design, the atmosphere, it shows that horror doesn't have to be expensive. And in a lot of ways, it is a love letter to some of the movie making magic that makes horror so special and why new filmmakers tend to gravitate towards horror because you can do so much with so little. This is a movie that should be placed early on in the month because it, again, like some of the other entries on this list, sets you in the mood. It's more about being present and less about intense and loud situations. Next up, we've got 1933's The Invisible Man. James Whale turns H.G. Wells' premise into a wicked cocktail of terror and gallows humor. And Claude Rains, seen mostly in bandages and a felt hat, somehow gives one of the most physical voice performances in horror history. The film's energy is anarchic, a cackling fugitive scientist who weaponizes absence, wrecking tea rooms and small town normalcy with the same glee he brings to scientific transgression. It's funny without ever feeling safe. And that tonal whiplash is the point. Whale understands that the line between cackling freedom and moral vacancy is razor thin. What makes this essential October viewing is how the effects and the themes fuse together. John Fulton's illusions, floating cigarettes, empty shirts, buttoning themselves, footprints filling with snow aren't just spectacle. They're character beats. Invisibility becomes a metaphor for unaccountable power and the corrosive thrill of getting away with it. Rain's velvet menace curdles into tragedy by the final reel, and you realize the true horror isn't what you can't see. It's what you can't restrain once the mask and the man come off. Next up, we are sticking with the classics with 1960s Psycho. See, this one is where I cheat a little bit. We saw this movie in theaters just a couple of weeks ago, and it's actually the second time that we saw it in theaters, and there's an argument to be made that pound for pound, this is a perfect movie. This movie is phenomenal from start to finish. It is the crossroads where American horror grows up. Hitchcock brings his dark storytelling to the forefront here. And Bernard Herrmann's strings are iconic. The shower scene is a seismic shift in tone for the entirety of the movie. But the trick isn't just the kill, it's the compassion wrapped around the blade. Janet Leigh's Marion Crane is a protagonist that you believe in, and it feels like maybe she's starting to rethink her actions. Maybe we're going to get some redemption for her character, right up until the movie teaches you to fear the narrative itself. What makes this vital each October is simply Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins playing loneliness like a musical instrument. The film's final monologue turns horror into poetry, a mind rationalizing itself into an empty room. Watch it again, knowing where it goes, and you'll notice how the camera slides with secrets, how lighting is suggestive, and how the hotel architecture composes guilt. It is a perfect storm of craft and cruelty, and it never stops evolving in your head. Now, Psycho, in and of itself, could have very easily been a single standalone masterpiece, and it would have lived on as a masterpiece. But over 20 years later, the story continued. And here's where I say it out loud with my whole chest. The Psycho franchise is one of the most dynamic horror franchises in all of cinema. Psycho 2, 1983, is Exhibit a sequel that dares to be tender. Dean Cundy's cinematography bathes the Bates house in dusky, wounded light. The script asks an almost indecent question. What if Norman is actually trying his best? It's a rehabilitation story haunted by audience suspicion. Every kindness he offers sounds like a loaded line. And Meg Tilly's performance is the moral accelerant. I love Meg Tilly in this role, and it is truly unfortunate that she wasn't more of an icon in horror because I personally prefer her acting to her sisters. Then you have Robert Logla's doctor, who adds complication instead of clarity. The violence lands because it feels like relapse rather than spectacle. This feels like tragedy wrapped up in brilliant character work. And it takes the beats of the first one, the people that end up being our de facto protagonist after the first one dies, and then the one who seems like he's going to be ends up becoming the antagonist of the movie. It's like these characters at the very end are the ones that you are forced to root for. And then the movie is daring enough to take that and then force you into a situation where they become part of the problem. Psycho 2 argues that horror can have empathy. It's bold, it's bruised, and it's weirdly beautiful. And then you have Psycho 3, 1986. Anthony Perkins steps behind the camera and turns the Bates universe into a hall of mirrors. Psycho 3 is sleazier. It's funnier. It's more stylized. A desert gothic riff with Catholic iconography and near vertigo opening that announces that we're in a filmmaker's playground. Jeff Fahey's Drifter brings a new rot to the motel, and Diana Scarwood's Marine arrives as a prayer unanswered. This one feels like the franchise is looking at itself through a cracked mirror. Perkins shoots water, mirrors, and taxidermy as totems. He's staging murders that are almost musical numbers about repression. It's less respectable than number two, but it's alive with ideas about sin, about spectacle, about audiences who insist on seeing what they shouldn't. In other words, it's perfect October viewing. Next up, we have the Dream Demon himself with 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is one I'm excited for because I'm going to get a chance to see it in theaters. The magic trick of the first Elm Street is that it doesn't ask you to believe in dreams. It asks you to remember them. And as somebody who vividly dreams, this one has stuck with me since I first saw it. The angles are all a little wrong. The colors are a little sickly. Doors lead to rooms that shouldn't exist. And time advances like a bad idea. Tina's death is a mission statement. Gravity fails, logic flees, and the film tells you, here, the rules don't matter. Freddy isn't a quit machine yet. He is a rumor with knives, all scrape and silhouette, an intruder in the part of you that should feel private. Now, if Sydney is the best, the only reason she got there was because of characters like Nancy. Nancy flips the final girl archetype into a strategy guide. She doesn't just survive, she studies. Sleep becomes a battlefield that she booby traps, and the movie tracks the toll of vigilance. The coffee cans, the circles under her eyes, the way adults smile like locksmiths who lost the key years ago. The suburban setting isn't comfort, it's camouflage. These parents paved over a sin and called it a cul-de-sac. The asphalt is starting to crack. What they wanted to leave in the past is refusing to stay dead. Rewatching now, the tactile effects still hum with danger. That elastic wall scene bulging over Nancy's bed feels blasphemous, like the house itself is breathing. Glenn's geyser, red midnight erupting out of the mattress, plays like dream logic given plumbing. And the score drones and chimes like a lullaby that forgot the words. The boiler room is industrial rot turned into mythic nature. This one is firmly on the October watch list because it reminds you that even when you sleep, you're not safe. Now, the very beginning of Elm Street is iconic, but so is the very end, just for a different reason. A decade later, we've got Wes Craven pulling up to reinvent the genre all over again. See, Nightmare on Elm Street was a different note where the landscape was dominated by silent stalkers. In comes this character who is larger than life in comparison. But by the time 1994 rolled around, the genre had definitely stalled out, and the character himself had definitely stalled out. So in 94, Craven takes the franchise off its hinges and points it at us. New Nightmare is meta. It is the proto that would end up becoming Scream 2 years later. But it's not as a week. It's a seance. Heather Langenkamp plays Heather Langenkamp, juggling motherhood, stalker phone calls, which were actually based off of real life. She was actually getting stalker phone calls, and a studio nudging her toward one more round with the glove. Robert Englund appears exactly twice. Warm and inviting and friendly. And then Freddy reimagined as something older, something meaner. A demon wearing Freddy like a Halloween costume. The redesign matters here because it's conveying the fact that this one is different. This is not the same Freddy Krueger. He's using the icon of Freddy as a totem into the real world. The earthquakes rattling 90s Los Angeles become a motif. Reality is already shuddering as sets and props and dreams start bleeding together. John Saxon slides from John Saxon into Nancy's dad in a single scene, and the shift plays like a spell snapping shut. Craven, playing himself, pitches the idea that stories are cages for monsters. Stop telling the tale, and the thing gets loose. Its theory is threat, and it lands because the film keeps the stakes human. Heather's son Dylan sleepwalking toward a mouth with teeth through traffic. This actually almost ended up on a list of the best Lovecraftian films because this takes a character that we thought we knew as MTV Freddy and takes all of the rules away and says, what if there's something deeper at play here? I suggest that you watch this immediately after 1984 so you can see where it started and really what's behind that initial story. Next up, we fast forward to 2014 with Ouija. Now, is Ouija great? Absolutely not. Is it useful? Definitely. October needs palate cleansers and it needs tonal pacing. If we go balls to the wall the entire time, you're going to get burnt out eventually, or at least some people will. And I really think that Ouija is, yeah, it's a product of its time, but it's a good product of its time. At least good for what it is. Now, mind you, I have a soft spot for this movie because I like 2000s paranormal. And when you watch this, if nothing else, yes, this can be a near miss, and you can see the template coming a mile away, but it sets the stage for the prequel that would come 2 years later. Same IP, completely different voltage. Mike Flanagan creates a movie that had no business being as good as it was. He takes the franchise back to 1967 and soaks in period grain and finds the human story at the center. A widowed mother running a seance scam who accidentally invites something real in. Lulu Wilson is the engine. Her performance is precise, it's eerie, and it's heartbreaking. And it brings a whole other tone to this movie to know that this movie does not end with a happy ending. This is not a movie where our family is going to ride off into the sunset. It's a family that cares about family dynamics, about the seduction of pretending that you're okay, about how the supernatural often mirrors the mundane, and it takes all of that and it punishes you for caring. Next up, we have 2015's Tales of Halloween. So, fun facts, I actually did not know about this movie until I was watching a different video here on YouTube about the best anthology movies around. And this was on their list. And I watched it, and it is phenomenal. When the leaves hit the curb and the porch light flicks on, Tales of Halloween is the bowl of mixed candy that you shouldn't try to start. It is 10 interlocking stories, one neighborhood, one night, an anthology that doesn't just take place on Halloween. It is immersive in everything that makes Halloween what it is. There's a devilish radio DJ that's whispering through the airwaves, trick-or-treaters with suspicious appetites, a slasher chasing a victim who refuses to follow the rules, and a jack-o'-lantern that refuses to stay ornamental. It's playful, it's mean, and it's proudly handmade. The kind of movie where the foam, latex, and corn syrup are features and not bugs. This has become essential viewing for October because it calibrates the room. Segments swing from campfire ghost stories to think pieces like Sweet Tooth or Friday the 31st or Bad Seed, just different flavors in the same bag. Urban legend, parody, and creature feature, all snapping together like plastic vampire teeth. Next up on our list, we are going back to the Universal Monster universe with the Wolfman. Universal's Wolfman is anchored by Lon Chaney Jr. It's classic and steeped in 30s gothic. The horrors are tragic and they sit at the heartbeat of a character driven universe. This is horror as a play. This is where movies forced the atmosphere because they didn't have anything else to rely on. And this is a world of myth and mythology. The werewolf myth here isn't about a monster that just shows up out of nowhere. It's about a man who has no other choice. The fog sets in, and Jack Pierce's iconic makeup stage a parable of inheritance and shame. The curse isn't something that you can explain. The harm that happens through you instead of by you is the resonant tragedy throughout this entire thing. This is October viewing because it is tactile. It is gothic personified. You can feel the crunch of the leaves, the glint of the silver cane, and the way full moons turn the world into a stage for monsters. This movie reads like folklore, simple on the surface, bottomless if you let it resonate. You pair this with something modern, and you will see the DNA everywhere. Now, this is where we take a hard turn into the Lovecraftian and the unknown. You've got 1996's Event Horizon. Call it a haunted house movie in orbit if you want to, but that undersells the blasphemy of this thing. Event Horizon is industrial Gothic, ribbed corridors like cathedrals, a gravity drive that spins like a demonic orrery, and a ship that seems less built than it is summoned. Paul W.S. Anderson shoots steel and shadow like ritualistic objects, while the score's orchestral thumb and the electronic pulse fuse awful liturgy to machinery. It's cosmic horror that smells like hot metal. It is a ship that looks more like a satanic altar. What actually curdles the stomach, though, isn't the gore. It's the idea behind it. Every character is stalked by a bespoke guilt. Captain Miller's fire, Dr. Weir's loss, Peter's child, and the ship weaponizes those memories until remorse becomes navigational. The farther they travel, the closer they get to themselves. And that's the trap. The event horizon doesn't just cross space, it erases distance between you and the one thing you never wanted to see again. This movie is mean. This movie is precise. The hell tape glimpses are cut like razor flickers, too fast to fully process, long enough to stain. Production design does most of the exposure. Barbed architecture, meat hook silhouettes, the drive room's spiked sphere reflecting faces back as fragments. Even the corrupted distress call, Latin chewed into a warning, feels less like language and more like contamination. You get the sense that there's more film out there someplace. There's more to see somewhere, but the absence becomes its own monster. What you can't recover keeps echoing. Sam Neill and Lawrence Fishburne ground the nightmare in clashing philosophies. A scientist willing to open the door again just to know. A commander who understands survival means sometimes refusing to question. Their performances turn a set piece movie into a debate about curiosity with burn marks. By the time the ship's history comes into focus, the mission parameters have shifted from rescue to exorcism. This is some of the most intense that you can get during the month of October if you allow for it. This is blue collar dread mixed with some of the most existential horror that you can find. Now, we leave this list on a lighter note with 1998's The Faculty. This one is to alien invasion movies what Scream is to slashers. It is self-aware, it's stylish, and it's unashamed to love the thing that it's deconstructing. The cast is late 90s to a T. Elijah Wood, Josh Hartnett, Jordana Brewster. This is a time capsule wrapped up in a fascinating story. And what makes it evergreen is its generosity to archetypes, the jock, the goth, the gossip. They're allowed to be more than their packaging, even as the movie plays with that packaging like a cat at the ribbon. Practical goo meets late 90s digital flourishes, and the finale is pure pump your fist sci-fi horror. When you want a crowd pleaser that still nudges your brain, this is the sweet spot. So that is part of my list. I like to keep things spontaneous, so I'm sure that more will be added as the month goes on, but sound off below and let me know what you are watching this October. Did you find a movie on this list that you just had to add to yours? And what recommendations do you have for me? Sound off below. Make sure that you like, you share, you subscribe, because honestly, it helps. This is an independent venture and it helps me making more content. But that's it for now. Until next time, stay spooky.